I'm very happy to invite up Ailbhe McKinney from the University of Oxford.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Ailbhe McKinney. I'm a postdoc at the University of Oxford, but I'm from Dublin, so it's really nice the conference is here. And I'm going to be presenting to you data from my PhD, which was at the University of Edinburgh. So the study today is about the timing of puberty in neurodivergent and neurotypical girls and the relationship with mental health. And I used a participatory methods approach, and it was an exploratory study. So for anyone who doesn't know what that means, it means that it's preliminary findings. We're not completely confident about the results yet, but they're preliminary findings and they need to be replicated. So my PhD topic was about the transition to adolescence in neurodivergent cis girls. So I'll say girls and children throughout this talk, but I want to acknowledge not everyone who gets a period is a girl, and not all girls get a period. So I know conference can be quite overwhelming, so I just have my main messages first, and then I'll go back through the background and the methods and results. So this work was co-produced with 15 neurodivergent women, and I asked them what they wanted to be researched about the transition to adolescence in neurodivergent girls, and they ranked puberty and menstruation very high as a very important research priority, second to camouflaging. And then this is the main kind of headline finding, is that the study showed that neurodivergent girls may be more likely to have an early or a late pubertal timing onset. And then with the co-production group, I co-produced resources that I'll give you links to at the end. So puberty is hormonal fluctuations and physical transformations, but it's also structural and functional maturation of the brain. So neurodivergent girls face unique challenges when they enter puberty, such as sensory difficulties, executive function difficulties, kind of needing more time to prepare for that, and the kind of, I liked how Rebecca said the hidden curriculum as well. So another specific challenge they could face could be the timing of puberty, and there hasn't been a lot of research on this. So the reason looking at timing, so what is timing of puberty? So it's the age an individual reaches a certain pubertal stage, so menarche, which is the medical term for your first period. And the reason it's interesting and important to study is because early puberty or late puberty has been found to be associated with worse mental health outcomes later in life. And this is there's a large body of research showing this. And it seems that this effect might be more pronounced in young girls in a few studies that compared girls and boys. So the timing of puberty in neurodivergent young people, there's limited research on this, and the findings are quite mixed. So for autistic girls, some studies have found early puberty is more likely, some have found late, some have found no results. With ADHD studies, there's been no significant findings. However, these studies didn't stratify by sex or gender. And then there's no studies on dyspraxia to my knowledge. So my research questions for this study, I designed these research questions and co-produced them with my stakeholder group, which I mentioned at the start, which is 15 adult neurodivergent women. And I don't have time to go into kind of the whole process I did for that, but you can ask me about that at the end if you're interested. But it was an iterative process, and I ensured that the research questions I picked was in line with what they wanted. So the two research questions are, is there a difference in pubertal timing measured by menarche first period between neurodivergent and neurotypical girls? And then is this difference in timing predictive of mental health symptoms? So my participants were 119 girls, 49 neurotypical and 70 neurodivergent. So that this graph just shows the neurodivergent girls in the sample. So this is just to illustrate the kind of overlapping neurodivergences and co-occurrences. And then in my neurotypical group, I screened for neurodivergence as well, just because a lot of girls between 11 and 14 may not know they're neurodivergent yet. So just to make sure the neurotypical group was only neurotypical children. So I met all the girls online and did the questionnaires with them to maintain data quality, and read out the questions to them if they wanted, and offered kind of a few different formats, so they could chat to me in the chat box if they wanted, or we could talk. They could have their camera on or off, whatever they wanted, and I could explain the questions to them if they didn't understand. So I asked them when they got their first period. So the way I asked this is, I just said, to kind of make them feel comfortable talking about it, I said, we're trying to understand the age that girls get their first period. Have you got your first period yet? And if you did, do you remember when it was? And then we kind of encouraged them to get a calendar, or ask their mum, or if they couldn't remember, we sort of said, like, do you remember what you were doing that day? And we'd figure out it was Easter, and then we were able to get a date. So all the girls were, but most of them, we didn't even need to do that, they just knew. And then I had 2 measures of mental health, an anxiety scale for children with autism spectrum disorder, and the revised children anxiety and depression scale. And then I also asked parents in a questionnaire for their child's BMI and a measure of socioeconomic status, because these 2 variables have been shown to affect timing of puberty. So this slide is a little dense, but please stay with me. So I analysed my data in 2 ways. So I analysed it as continuous data and as categorical data. So as continuous data, it was just saying the age they got their first period, so 11, 11.2, 11.5, and then I categorized that data into early, normal, and late, just by saying plus or minus 1 standard deviation. So minus 1 standard deviation was categorized as early, in between, plus or minus 1 standard deviation is normal, and then plus 1 standard deviation is late. And then in the second part, the girls in my study were 11 to 14, so some of them hadn't actually got their first period yet. Only 61 girls in the study had got their first period. So I didn't want to just kind of discount all that data. So the girls who hadn't got their period yet, which was sort of missing data, I suppose, I imputed the time they took, the age they took part in the study. So that would be because their period they've had to have got their period after that time. So that's kind of an exploratory secondary analysis I did. So this is for the kind of, I think of it as the real data, so the girls who got their period, and then the slide after this is for the data where I imputed the earliest age they could have got their period using the time they took part in the study. So the graph here, and then the bit at the top where it says continuous, if you just look at the graph, actually, the main finding is that the means were the same, but the variances were different. And this is after controlling for socioeconomic status, age, and BMI. I do have to point out that the neurodivergent people had a bigger sample, so that could be why there is more variance. However, the effect size is quite big. The standard deviation is almost double in the neurodivergent group, so that does suggest a real effect. And then when I did it with the categorical data, I didn't find an effect of neurotype on whether you were in the early, normal, or late category, but I think that was because possibly the sample was too small. So then this is for when I imputed the time they took part in the study for their timing of period. So continuous data, I again didn't find a difference in mean. This time I didn't find a difference in variance, but that sort of makes sense because I had reduced the variance by taking the age they took part in the study opposed to the actual age they got their period, so that kind of makes sense. And then with the categorical data, I did find an effect. So I collapsed the early and late group into 1 category for power, and I found that the neurodivergent girls were 2.7 times more likely to be in the early late group compared to the normal group. So this kind of altogether shows neurodivergent girls are more likely to have an early or late period. And then this slide just shows the mental health data. So the reason there's 2 graphs is because I had 2 mental health measures. So on the x-axis is the age they got their first period, and then the y-axis is the mental health scores, with higher scores meaning kind of worse mental health symptoms. So I fit a polynomial model to the 4th degree, and the 3rd degree fitted the best. So as you can see in the first bit of the graph, age of menarche predicts mental health, well, approaching significance, and then the rest later on it didn't. So this suggests getting your period very early is kind of linked to worse mental health. I have to say, for transparency, when I added BMI and SES to the model, the results became non-significant, but that could be because they're confounders, or it could be because my sample wasn't big enough. So my kind of preliminary findings show that the mean age of menarche was the same, but the variances were different. And what does this sort of mean? So it really means just to be prepared if you have a neurodivergent child, that they might get their first period earlier. They might be the earliest in the class. So just be prepared and kind of have talked to them about it early. And then also it's relevant because there's this large body of work showing that atypical timing of puberty is linked to worse mental health. And then I have this slide just showing the resources I made in my PhD. So this is on the EPIC website, the Edinburgh Psychosocial Intervention for Children. My supervisor, Sinead Rhodes, made. So we have our resources there. So there's an infographic, a video, and then this big one in the middle. It's on the Hope Edinburgh website, and it's a booklet going through for parents and teachers, kind of how to explain first periods to a neurodivergent child, kind of with links to resources, kind of going through what period products to use and how to explain it to them, when your child might have a problematic period and when you might need to go to the GP. And there's a link there to a talk I gave for parents on first periods. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'd love to invite some questions if anyone has any. So please do come up to the mics.
Hi, I have 2 questions. Number 1 is, why is early puberty linked to poorer mental health in general? And then, I know it's preliminary, but what do you think could be some of the factors that could be specific to autistic girls? Like, I'm thinking potentially early show of secondary sex characteristics leads to more sexual harassment, potential trauma or traumatic experiences, etc.
Sorry, what was the first one again? Sorry.
The first one was, why is early puberty linked to poorer mental health in general?
It's not really exactly understood why, even though we see this consistent pattern in the literature since the 90s, we don't exactly know why. Kind of the thing you said there, where kind of sometimes the child that goes through puberty first and they might hang out with older kids and might be exposed to more things. That was sort of the kind of theory that people used to talk about. It's kind of gone a little bit out of fashion now. I think now people are more looking at the kind of neuroscience and the maturation of the brain at that time, and if early maturation sort of leads to psychiatric and mental health problems. But it's not exactly understood. And why neurodivergent kids might be more likely to have early or late puberty, again, it's not exactly understood. There could be some sort of kind of hormonal explanation, which kind of fits with the body of work showing autistic women are more likely to have, painful periods and more likely to have PCOS, is that the acronym? I can't remember. And so it could be that. It could also be that the other factors affecting timing of puberty, like BMI and SES and diet, might be more variable in the neurodivergent population, so that's why it's more variable. But yeah, it's really not quite understood yet.
Okay, thank you.
Some questions about confounding factors to do with mental health and autism.
Sorry, I can't quite hear you.
Questions about potential confounding factors for mental health and autism with regard to puberty.
Yeah.
I don't know if you looked at or were able to look at gender identity of the children involved. We know that trans.
Yeah. I included trans children and non-binary children in my study, even though it was for cis girls because they self-selected to the studies, so they felt they still had something to contribute. And I didn't want to exclude them because, you know, there's no research on puberty for those groups. So, it definitely could be a factor because then it creates more gender dysphoria as you enter puberty. So yeah, that's a really interesting explanation. I'd say it does contribute. I'd say it is part of the story, definitely, yeah.
And regarding chronic pain, again, painful periods are been linked to chronic pain in adults, and that is very common in the autistic communities. Is that something you're also able to look at with regards to timing and this at this time, or?
No, I didn't look at that, but yeah, it's very kind of interesting. Women with hypermobility as well report painful periods. So yeah, I think there's definitely something to that. I'd say they are all linked in some way that we hopefully can research more and understand in the next few years. Yeah, I think you're probably right.
I think I'm going to move us on now, if that's okay, to our last talk. Thank you so much.